Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to something a little bit different, a bit experimental, so bear with me as we set this up. I might call it something like Road to Game of the Year. I think that's kind of catchy and it does cover off on what's happening here. Long and short of it is I've been reviewing games in recent times and I'm trying to review 2 a week for 50 weeks a year. Call that 100. I like the idea of ranking things from 1 to 100, actually having a score system that kind of conveys helpful information to you, the consumer, as opposed to 7 or 8 out of 10. And what does that even mean anymore when 50 games a year get the same score? My misstep was trying to implement that into my actual review videos, and honestly, it caused confusion with a lot of people. In fact, enough confusion where I think the smart move is to move it to its own section, like this. So this is the setup, this is why we're here. So this video, and going forward, will serve as a weekly catch-up, week in review, where I'll go over the games that we covered in overview, I go over the games that we reviewed, and I'll seed them in a ranking from 1 to 100. And the hope would be that by the end of the year, we have 100 games covered, and I've ranked them from top to bottom. That's not to say game number 100 is going to be dog shit or anything like that, because I'm probably not going to review terrible games, not if I can help it. It'd just mean that it was probably a year full of brilliant games, and that's where it happens to sit. Now we're starting a bit behind the ball at the moment, so there'll be a catch-up component. So the plan would be is I'll go over the 2 games that I reviewed this week and seed them, and I'll also seed 1 that I reviewed previously already this year. So we'll slowly be rolling them in until we'll get to a point where we're caught up and we're just in the normal rhythm of 2 games per week. So to quickly go over it, let's go down the list. What did we cover in overviews today? And for those not across it, that's where I only look at the first 2 hours of a game. The Steam refund window, as it were. That's long enough for you to decide whether you want to refund a game or not, and so I play it for that long and save you the trouble and put it on your radar. First up is Brew Barons, which is so cool. I think it's out now by the time I'm recording this. Really interesting sort of biplane. People said Porco Rosso is what it looks like. Studio Ghibli, I get that, sure, but my touchstone is Valkyria Chronicles. To me, it is a biplane brewery management dogfighting game, and it seemed very, very promising. I would very much like to come back to it if I get the chance. But yeah, cruising around in your sort of flight sim, you can do mouse control, collecting resources, wheat, fruit, that sort of stuff, and making brews, beers, cider, all that sort of stuff, and shipping them out around the sort of island networks versus some pirates. It's very cool, very interesting, unusual, original. So yeah, check that out. Next up was Welcome to Paradise with a Z. I saw in some of my comments people talking about How to Survive, which I think is a game series I'm just not familiar with, but apparently this is pretty close to it. And that was really cool because for me, I do roll my eyes a bit at zombie stuff. I'm still fatigued all these years later. Zombie this, zombie that. As much as I actually enjoy zombie games, things like I like Dead Island, Dead Rising, I like all the Resident Evil games, but for every good game, there's 10 generic ones. So yeah, at first blush, I was a little reluctant going into it, but I'm glad I gave it a go. It's really quite interesting. It's kind of ARPG light, but it's got base building stuff and all that. So in the flavor of a Diablo 4, that sort of thing, but not nearly as complex, a lot more accessible. And the shtick is that you've got a little zombie sidekick that you have cruise around with you. You equip him with gear and he fights. So sort of like a pet build ARPG, but a much more sort of accessible level, and it has a kind of funny narrative through line as well. I've heard from some guys in my Discord that have played it more than me, because again, I only gave it 2 hours, that maybe it does get a little bit worn out and frustrating further in, so I guess be aware of that. But for my part, I actually was surprisingly impressed with it, and I'll probably try and have to find some time to get back to it. And then of course we've got Winter Survival, talking about things that sort of present in a generic fashion. This thing had so many follows on Steam, and just there's a lot of fanfare around it, hype, dare I say. And I look at it and I go, oh yeah? I mean, I love The Long Dark, but I also see that Euro SA simulator shovelware sort of DNA there as well, which makes me very skeptical. You get hundreds of those games a year and hundreds of them are crap, but I'm glad I gave that a go. It's really, really good. As far as having a narrative tied into the sandbox, it kind of does it better, I think, than Long Dark. I really don't rate the Long Dark narrative, and I'm only interested in the survival aspect. A couple dealing with grief and all that. I don't really want to play that. Whereas this channels its inspirations, and the examples I used were The Grey and The Revenant. You're kind of on the run from bears and wolves that are dogging and hunting you So it's not just straight open world sandbox that you see with most of these games. It actually has a pretty interesting narrative hanging over your head, but also not sucking all the air out of the room. So that's really promising and interesting. It is in early access, so I don't know how much I'm going to play of it now, but I feel like when it does go into full release in a year or two or whenever, there's a good chance I'd review that in 1.0. So yeah, a week of interesting games that maybe don't present super well, but glad that I, or, on behalf of you, someone is actually digging a little bit deeper and having a look, because I kind of found some gems by accident. As far as reviews, I kind of ended up doing 3 reviews technically this week. Terminator sort of snuck in. It was supposed to be last week, but yeah, again, I was playing catch up a little bit. I think I'm up to speed for 2 a week at the moment, but we'll see. Anyway, so that makes it easy. These are the 3 games that we're going to seed in the list today. And look, you're gonna have to bear with me. I'm still working out the format and how to do this, and I don't do listicles normally, so this is new. Let's start with Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. Bit disappointing, but at the same time, it's not like it's sort of overpromised or anything like that. It's not different from the original. It's only 2.5 hours long, and I think I paid something like $30 for whatever. So my value judgment, which is a bare minimum that everything usually passes, this did not pass. And so my honest take is wishlist it, because it is still the same game. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons from 10 years ago or whatever. Brilliant game, a must-play game. I really do think if you can find a way to play it, you should. But the value that's added from this new version, I don't actually think really justifies buying it. It adds co-op, and it's one of those things, spoiler cast type things. The controls are not supposed to be co-op, the game's not supposed to be co-op, and the way that the story goes and the finale wraps up, I just can't see how splitting the control method into 2 players doing 2 dudes would actually work, and it will take away from the very clever systems that they've implemented. So in a way, the one thing that they added in this game takes away from the game. The original's still perfectly good, and I reckon there's still better artistic cohesion in it, because when they scaled all the graphics up and they've decided to go in for like face zoom shots and trying to make it more sort of emotionally arresting, I suppose, they've missed the mark completely. They've made it sort of uncanny valley. It's I suppose like it'd be like taking Pixar movies and then trying to make the graphics like ultra realistic. Not that that's what happened here 1-to-1, but you sort of get what I mean. If you push the bar in that direction, at a certain point, they lose their Pixar cartoony charm, and I think that's what they did with this. So in an attempt to, reinvigorate, overhaul, update, they kind of missed the mark in many ways. So I'm going to seed this at 3, being that there's only going to be 3 games on our list for now. You're going to have to give me a year before it's 100. Next up is Terminator Dark Fate Defiance. So this is a really weird game. I wouldn't call it bad. It's doing some unusual stuff, kind of like Men of War, hardcore, high fidelity management. So it's not so much like a Company Heroes, but it's a game where you put dudes in and out of your trucks and load them and all that. Like, it's fiddly. It works, but that's going to turn some people off. It's much more towards simulation, if you could say that, than it is action arcade. But yeah, you have this overarching world campaign. It's post Judgment Day Terminator, and it's really fun. I really enjoyed it. You kind of got an RPG mechanic, but for all the dudes in your army, you're upgrading them, equipping gear. It's really involved, but then the lethality of it's very high, and it doesn't really match up, right? And if you took the inspirations that it's doing from, say, like I used Baldur's Gate as an example, and I stand by it, right? It'd be like if your Baldur's Gate characters could get permanently one-tapped and you just replace them, like sort of misses the mark, you know? As soon as you start elevating your characters, or in this case units and vehicles, into a more sort of main character hero invested RPG type unit, you kind of got to give them a bit of plot armor, I think. Otherwise you're just going to save scum, or it's going to end in frustration where you spend half an hour tricking out your favorite truck and it gets zipped by a rocket that you didn't see off screen. So I'm not trying to be down on it or anything like that, but it is one of those things, go in with your eyes open. Very hardcore, but I actually had a lot of fun with it. The narrative goes in wild directions depending on who you talk to, who you team up with, go to totally different regions. Like it puts a lot of narrative games to shame that sort of brag about having branching paths and all that. This does, and it has no right to be this good, being that it is ultimately a highly technical and kind of sweaty RTS. So yeah, I'm going to seed that at 2 out of 3. And last but definitely not least is Expeditions, a mud runner game. So I really like this. At first I bounced off it actually. I was kind of down on it. It's not SnowRunner 2. It is definitely a spin-off of SnowRunner. It takes a lot of the learnings from that, but it in a way it scales it down. I've used the term intimate to explain it because you're cruising around over contours and all that. It's pretty much you and your truck. It's less about hauling freight and building up communities. It's more about, dare I say, little expeditions, little exploring out into the wild. And yeah, it's a tough recommendation because it's really good. It's really hardcore. It's really niche. It's kind of more hardcore than SnowRunner in many ways. So, you know, if you're from the outside coming in, I'd recommend checking SnowRunner first. But at the same time, I feel like some people might fall in the same trap that I almost fell into, is that they're going to be down on this game because they're a hardcore SnowRunner person. And you know how it gets. People get more hardcore the more niche they get. And they're probably going to condemn this for not being SnowRunner 2. And personally, in a world where we just get safe shovelware sequels that don't really iterate that much, this is fantastic to see, this sort of risky spin-off niche of a niche sequel. I really liked it. I loved it. In fact, I want to go back and play some more. It really, really clicked with me after my hours. So we're going to rank this at 1 of 3. So there you have it. As it stands, I've only got 3 games in the rankings. Come next week, I'll put another 3 in, and that'll be the 2 I review this week and 1 from the backlog. And we'll eventually catch up and we'll be into a 2 rhythm. And the idea is 1 is the best, 100 is the bottom. I don't even want to say not best. Look, if a game's shit, I'm going to beat the shit out of it. I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, I'm not going out of my way to review bad games. This is my time. I'm spending a year doing this. I want to play 100 good games. It's just a case of I get a lot of these keys for free. You don't. Are you going to pay $100 for every single one of these freaking games? No. So the hope is that this ranking system will be helpful. And it also, you know, it puts a little bookend on the end of my week, and maybe in that review that I just did then of all the games I covered over the week, maybe you're now going to go and look at those videos and check it out for yourself and get a bit more info from my actual deeper dives. Anyway, it's still a work in progress. Hopefully people like this, and you know, if you have some feedback, let me know. I'm looking forward to seeing how this is received. I know a lot of people that weren't confused by the ranking system were kind of excited to see where it goes. But if I tuck this away at a little end of week weekend video, I wonder if people will watch it and be interested in it. So make sure you let me know. Drop a comment if you found this helpful or interesting. All right, team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.